Likkutei Torah Daf Nun Vav is the Maimer Zois Chukas Torah. It continues from here Daf Nun Vav until the third column of Nun Zayin, which then begins a beer on this Maimer. So the Maimer says, Vayada ber Havaya v'goymer Zois Chukas Torah shetziva Havaya leimor. We have to understand what's the pshat that it repeats Havaya twice. First it says Havaya spoke to Moshe, that Havaya is speaking, Zois Chukas Torah, and then the next words are Ashetziva Havaya. So Hashem should have said that I'm commanding you. So why does it repeat Havaya twice in the pasuk? Also, we have to understand a little the Inin of Adumah that's called Chukas HaTorah, that the generic chayk of Torah is Adumah. What's the Inin of Adumah? That it's connected to the Inin of Chukas HaTorah, meaning that the Alter was going to explain there are different levels of Torah, and Adumah is connected to what we're going to see is the essence of Torah, which is called Chukas HaTorah. Ha'inyan, because we know this Torah shebechsav, which is that Hashem says to Moshe and Moshe writes. And then there's Divrei Seifrim, which is Torah shebal peh. So we have the written letters of Torah shebechsav, which then becomes, through all the explanations, Torah shebal peh. But then the essence of Torah, of course, is given over through the luchos. And chorus al haluchos, on the luchos habris, were oisius hachakika, the letters were engraved into the luchos, which is a higher level. Oisius HaChakika is a higher level. Chukas HaTorah is a higher level than even Torah Shebechsav, because Torah Shebechsav manifests as written letters, which is the ink on the Sefer Torah. And so the ink is something separate from the actual klaf. Before the letters were written, it didn't have any shaykhs to the klaf. Only afterwards, when the sofer writes with the ink, then it becomes united with the klaf. But engraved letters are mineu bei. They're literally part of the stone that they're engraved in. They're davar echad mamish with the stone. And this is the resolution of what seems to be a contradiction. That sometimes it says in the Zohar that araisa miskasha bekucha brichu, that there are three knots, three bonds, three ties. The Yisrael Araisa v'Kutsha B'richu, that Araisa is connected to Kadosh Baruch Hu. But sometimes it says Araisa v'Kutsha B'richu kulachad, that God is one with Torah. So which is it? Is He connected to Torah, miskashra, or is it kulachad? So the Mokar and Shoyrash HaTorah, which is Oisis HaChakika. Oisis HaChakika, the engraved letters, are the actual source and Shoyrash of Torah as they're one with Hashem Mamish, which is the meaning that they're like the letters of engraving, how the engraved letters are one with the stone. So the shoyrish and mokar of Torah is chad mamish HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But then when the Torah comes down into Seder Shtalshlos and becomes enclothed in Chachma Ubina, the Torah gets enclothed in the garment of intellectual or rational ideas that we have the Torah in front of us. So even though Chachma and Bina are Kadma La'olam, even, of course, the Torah, as it's at the level of Oisius Shebeksav Chachmu Bina, Alpaim Shana Kadma Leilam, it's way above, transcends worlds, but it's still Chachma and Bina, which is a Davar Noisef. It's like the ink that didn't have a shaykhus with the klaf. Chachma Bina didn't have a shaykhus to Atzmus Mamish. So Torah, as it descends into the garment of Chachma Bina, then it becomes Oisius Aksav. Like the ink that even though it was something other than the klaf, but when it gets written, then it becomes la'achodim, becomes connected. So the Torah, as it's in front of us, that michachma nafkas, that comes out of chachma, that's connected to chachma bina, that's oisis aksav. But zois chukas Torah means that Adumah somehow is connected to Torah as it's chukas Torah, as it's oisis achakika. And what that means is that through the fulfillment of the mitzvah of Adumah, which is the chukah, the Adumah somehow draws down the Torah from its ultimate source as it's one with Hashem, as its letters engraved, like letters engraved on a stone are one with the stone. Torah, the letters of Torah, as it's mamash one with Hashem. So through Adumah, we draw down that level, Torah, as it's at the level of Oisius HaChakika, to be revealed in the level of Torah that's Oisius of Ksav, and through that also, that the essence of Torah should be revealed also in Torah Shebal Peh. Because Adumah is kalalos HaTorah, as we're going to learn. There's something about Adumah which is the whole general idea of what all of Torah mitzvahs are about. And that's why Adumah is able to draw down Torah from the level of engraved letters into the level of written letters on Torah Shabbal Peh, to make Torah, so to speak. For that's the reason that the soul came down from its place in Gan Eden, in order to make the Torah, like the Torah says, Lasis is kol chukim eila, va'asisam oisam. So the Alter Rebbe says that means that we actually make the mitzvahs. Lasois oisam, we make the mitzvahs, we make the Torah by drawing down from Torah as it's in the engraved letters and atzmos mamish into Torah shebechsav, and then lasos oisam v'chai behem, that through making, through forming Torah, through bringing Torah's essence into the Torah down here below, v'chai behem, we get special vitality. And this is one of the reasons that the neshamas came into the body. It's a yirid tzarech aliyah, to be able to have this arousal from below, to make the Torah, so to speak, that in the Torah should be the essence of Hashem mamish, all through zois chukas Torah. So we have to understand, how is it that dafka Adumah, why is it kalalos Torah, and it's able to draw down Torah from oisis hakika, from the engraved letters. Inin, because what bechlal is the Inin of all mitzvahs? It's that a person should come to a madrega of being in a constant Ratzah v'shuv. That a Jew should be like the Chayas HaKodesh. It says V'chayas Ratzah v'shuv. Or like it says by Avram Avinu, Avram halach v'nasaya hanegba, the Inin of going back and forth, traveling towards Hashem and away from Hashem, running towards Hashem and being propelled backwards back into the world. And the whole purpose of Torah and mitzvahs is to come to this state, to be in this constant flux, this constant dialectic of Ratzah v'shuv. And this essential Ratzah v'shuv is described in the Sefer Yetzirah as V'im ratz libcha shuv le'echad. If your heart runs forward, return to the one. In those words are the secret of Ratzah v'shuv. What does it mean when your heart runs forward? Ki bina liba, the heart is where there's bina. And that means through the hisbonenus, through the meditation into the vastness of Hashem. How even Olam Haba, all the revelations of the next world, which is an infinite pleasure, which is why it's worth it to go to Gehenna to be able to have Olam Haba, because the pleasure is so infinite, and yet all that revelation of Olam Haba is only like one letter. How much does it take? How much does it take of a person to say one letter? What's the fraction of one letter that you say to you? How much of you are invested in that one letter? That's how much all the worlds, even all the Olam Haba, is in, how much God's light is invested. One letter, Kaloi Choshev Mamish, it's completely inconsequential and insignificant. Ta'atzma Ein Sof Baruch Hu. And that's the meaning of Ki Imcha Makar Chaim. That Makar Chaim, the source of life, the source of our life, which is Gan Eden Olam Haba, is Imcha. It's something secondary to you. Tafalu Batal Tamahusav Atzmusai. And through meditating on this, how all the worlds of Mamish are completely insignificant. Lagabe Mahusav Atzmusai. Through that is aroused the Chuka, desire, Elav Yisbarach Mamish, to God, to Atzmus Mamish, to become included and nullified within Hashem, which is the meaning of Ibili. That even Gan Eden, which is called Imcha Makar Chaim, Loi Chafatzti, Rak Elav Yisbarach Mamish, we only want Atzmos. And this Rotzu, this running towards Hashem, is called Ratz Libcha, that it's your heart that's running to Hashem. So before we said that the heart is where there's bina as beinunus, and now the Alter Rebbe adds that the heart also is the place where there's yisoid ha'esh shebelev, as it says in the first parak of Tanya, that all of our created reality is made up of earth, wind, water, and fire, solid, liquid, gas, and energy. And in the heart, the primary element of the heart is the yisoid ha'esh, is the element of fire. That's what's primary in the heart. That's why the heart is a place of heat. And so Ratz Libcha literally means that your heart goes on fire for Hashem. And then continuing with the words from the Sefer Yetzirah of Ratz Libcha Shuv le'echad. What's Shuv le'echad? Then you meditate on his Sovev Kol Almin. Before, when you were meditating that all the worlds are only just like one letter vis-a-vis God. That's all what all the worlds are made up of, so to speak, which is Mamali Kol Alman. But the Shuv le'echad, after your heart goes on fire with running towards God, then we have to meditate on Sovev Kol Alman, that Hashem's infinite light, Ein lefan of Milo Mata, there's no upper and lower vis-a-vis God's essential infinite light, of the encompassing transcendent light of Sovev Kol Alman. And the highest upper worlds with physical asiyah gashmis are exactly equal vis-a-vis save of kol almin, like it says, es hashamayim ves haaretz ani mole, do I not fill heaven and earth? Im kein lo shayich ratzi v'aliyah. And when you meditate on this, we understand that it's not shayich, there's no necessity to run towards God and ascend towards God, ki hu nimtza lamata, k'may lamayla, because God is down here below, just like He is in the upper worlds, exactly the same. And all the ascents that souls have, michael el chayil, in all the worlds, in only shayich with min mamali kol almin, in God's contracted light. But when it comes to Save of Kol Alman, the opposite. In Mashiach comes in the future, Save of Kol Alman will be revealed dafka down here below Lamata, which is the meaning, how the Alter Rebbe explains the pasuk in Amos. Nafla v'lo soisif kum besulas Yisrael, she has fallen and she will not rise up again, the maiden of Israel. What does that mean? Chalila, she won't rise up again. She'ein tzarech aliyos, that when Mashiach comes, we won't have to rise up again, because the revelation will dafka be down here below, through keeping Torah mitzvahs ba'asiyah. And so that meditation is what causes the shuv, the returning, so to speak, quote unquote, propelled away from Hashem, the feeling of being propelled away and being in the world. That's the shuv. When that comes from the meditation of Save of Kol Alman, when one contemplates that ani moli, that Hashem's infinite light mamish is here, just like in the highest worlds, that causes the shuv, that one is in a state of yira ubitul. It makes a person have a state of complete awe and nullification to when one feels that one is within the presence of Hashem's infinite light. And this year is higher than Ahava, which is Eish. But that the bittul, this year, the bittul to Save of Kol Almin, that comes primarily from the Yesod Hamayim, the Indian of water. Because whereas when it came to this bainanus of the Ratzoi, that was primarily an Indian of Bina, in the heart, which is fire, the bainanus of that Save of Kol Alman is mamish here, and that brings a state of yira and bittul and shoiv. That's an Indian of water, the Indian of chachma. It's a more calm feeling that one doesn't have to run. It's like water is calm and still. One doesn't have to run anywhere, and that comes from the koyach ma, chachma, which is higher than bina. As we know, Chachma is an Indian of complete bittul, when, like Chachma is an Indian of Re'iyah, like when one sees, so to speak, with the mind's eye, Hashem's infinite light, one is in a complete state of bittul and shoiv. That's the Indian of becoming still like water. But how does a person actually come to be in this state of Ratzah v'shoiv? That these meditations should have the proper effect, that's through kiyam ha-mitzvahs, that's through actually keeping the mitzvahs, because mitzvahs, on one hand, it says miminoi eish das lamoi, miminoi, the right side is the side of water, and eish das is the Indian of fire. So mitzvahs have both these things of water and fire, and through that brings about, when a person keeps the mitzvahs, it brings about in his soul the Indian of Ratzah v'shoiv, the Indian of fire and water, which is the general point of all of Torah, which is why all the mitzvahs were founded to make that a person should have this arousal from below the Ratzoi. And then the Isarus de La'ela, that will be the responsive shoiv that comes afterwards, that's from all of Torah mitzvahs. But Parah Adumah is this Inyan in its most general state, in its most pronounced state. Meaning that even though all the mitzvahs bring about within a person's soul the ability to be in this dialectic flux of Ratzah v'shoiv, but that's just another added element to what other mitzvahs are. But Parah Adumah, this is Zois Chukas Torah, this is the whole inyan of Torah of this Ratzah v'shoiv. The whole inyan of the Torah of Ratzah v'shoiv is signified and instantiated by Parah Adumah, because Parah Adumah is the only mitzvah that we do with fire and water. The Retsoo is through the burning of the cow and making it into ashes. The shov is the Indian of the pouring the water, Maim Chaim El Keli. And so Zois Chukas Torah, Dafka Parah Adumah, allows a person to draw down from Oisius HaChakika, because the Retsoo, V'shoiv, the Retsoo towards Hashem's essence, and then the shoiv drawing Hashem back down below through keeping Torah mitzvahs down below. So you have both these elements in the Parah Adumah. So therefore, Zois Chukas Torah, Dafka Parah Adumah, is the mitzvah that it brings about this whole inyan of Ratzah v'shoiv in a revealed way. Again, even though all the other mitzvahs have this bechina, but it's not in a revealed way in other mitzvahs. It's just an added element, but in Parah Adumah, it's the whole inyan of Parah Adumah is the burning into ashes and the Maim Chaim, and therefore it's called Zois Chukas Torah. That Adumah is mamash kalalos Torah, the general inyan of what all the Torah is about, which is the inyan of Retsoo ושוב, and that's through the ashes and the water, which is essentially the chibur, the fusion of the Retsoo ושוב, putting the ashes into the water. And the inyan of putting the ashes into the water and the chibur of Retsoo ושוב is that even when one is in the middle of doing the shov, one has to have the ashes, so to speak, on top, meaning that one has to remember that one has to be running towards Hashem and not just wanting to bring into this world. And on the other hand, even when one is doing the Retsoo, one shouldn't be caught up in the klais and nefesh of Retsoo, and one should remember that the ultimate tachlis hakavana is the shov, as all this is explained in Tanya chapter 50, Perek Nun. And through this chibur of the ashes and the water, which is the chibur of the mind, which is water, and the heart, which is fire, through the unification of the fiery heart with the calm that comes from God's presence, one draws down Torah from the level of Oisis HaChakika. And now we begin Ois Beis, that now we have to understand more in detail. How is the burning of the cow? How does that connect it to the inyan of Retsoo, towards running towards Hashem? Ha'inyan. To understand this, it's based on what the Zohar says, that Parah kabilas min smola, that the secret of the cow, the inyan of the cow, is the left side, the side of the left, because on the divine chariot, on the Merkava, is pnei shor mahasmol. The ox is on the left, and of course the cow is connected to the ox. And what's the inyan of the left side? Like Chazal say, smol doiche, v'yamin mekareves. The side of the left pushes away, and the side of the right draws near. And by Hashem you have these two ways, Yomin Smol Tifroitzi, that Hashem's light bursts forth in the way of right and left. But the difference is that when it comes from the side of the right, then the Hashpa is Behez Galus Or, that it's a very open revelation of Hashem, and that's the Yamin Mekareves, that one feels that one is getting close to Hashem because there's the revelation. And at that state, when Hashem is revealing His light in the side of Yamin, the Hitzoniim, the other side, is not able to receive and nurse, ynekah, from the side of Yamin, because it's an openly revealed hiskarvus and chiba that Hashem gives only to the side of holiness, as it says, Ahafti eschem, Amar Havaya. And Yair Panav Itanu, the Dafka, we get the Panim, that's the side of the right, and therefore the Chitzainim, the Klippas, don't receive from the side of the right. The Klippas only receive from the Acharayim. Like it says in Tanya, that acharai means like somebody that throws something over their shoulder to someone that you don't really want to give to, but you have no choice. So you like throw it over your shoulder to them. A mashal I heard is, imagine the people that were taking care of Eichmann when he was in jail, when they had to give him food during the trial. It's completely not something you enjoy doing, and you throw it over your shoulder, turning your back to the receiver, and that's what it means, the side of the left, and that side, the klippas and the chitzainim could nurse and get a sustenance. Because the left side is smol doiche, that the hashpa, that the Hashem's light that comes from the side of left is not yamin mekareves, it's rather doiche, dechia, shedoiches hashpa, like you're pushing away, like Hashem pushes away from many tzimtzumim, dechia achar dechia, pushing away through so many tzimtzumim, that Hashem completely conceals the light to the extent that even the חיצונים are able to receive from the side of the left. And the side of the left is connected, like we said, to Parah, because Pnei Shor Masmol, that the shor is on the left side of the Merkava. And so the mitzvah of Adumah was to be masakin, to rectify this inyan, to rectify the giving to the חיצונים from the side of the left. And that's why one of the main avodas of the Adumah is that the kohen would sprinkle 7 times. From Harazesim that he was standing on, he would sprinkle facing Pnei Oil Moed, he would face the Beis HaMikdash, that he should be able to see the inside the heichal, and he would sprinkle the cow's blood with his finger 7 times. What's this inyan that he had to see, so to speak, the heichal, he had to see the Oil Moed? That's in order to take out the toiv, the good, that's in the cow. Because the cow does come from the Pnei Shor Shebemerkava. And so the shirish, the root of the cow, the root of the side of the left is the Pnei Shor Shebemerkava. And by sprinkling the blood towards the Beis HaMikdash, that's, so to speak, taking the good out of it, by elevating the side of the left to its root, to its shirish up above in the Pnei Shor. And then is the burning of the cow. After you sprinkle the blood, you burn the cow to make it into ashes. What's the inyan of that? So Just like al derech moshel, when a person burns wood and it becomes ashes, the ashes are the mahusev atzmuse shel ha'etz. The essence of the tree is the actual ashes, the solid, the ashes, because hakol hayim and offer, everything grows from the ground, from the offer, the dirt of the ground. But when you have the tree, the piece of wood in front of you, it's not ashes because fire, wind, and water have become added to the ashes to make the tsura, the form of a piece of wood. So the essential chaymer, the essential material out of which the eitz is made, is offer, yisoida offer. What makes the tsura, the form of the wood, is the eish maim ruach that's added to the ashes to make the form of a piece of wood. But when a person burns the wood, then the three elements of fire, water, and wind that were in the wood are completely chased away, or gone with the wind, and they go up in smoke. The smoke actually is the fire, water, and wind going out of the element of afer, of dirt, of ashes, which is the essential chaymer of what the wood is. The chaymer pashut, the essential material, the simple material, the what it's actually made out of, so to speak, deeper than the form, the actual material that it's made out of. The chaymer pashut of the wood is the yesod ha'afar, is the element of dirt, of dust, and the other elements added to it of fire, wind, and water. They bring about the tsura, the form of the piece of wood, of the tree. But by burning the tree, burning the wood, all that's left is the etzem chaymer, the essential material of it, which is the ashes. And the Alter Rebbe is now going to explain how this brings about the rotzi, the running towards Hashem. What he's going to explain is that just like when it comes to burning something, what happens when you burn something? You take away its tsura, its form, and you reduce it to its most essential element of offer. So to an avodas Hashem, that's what we have to do with the nefesh bahamis, which also comes from the pnei shor ma'asmol. The essential root of the nefesh bahamis is also pnei shor ma'asmol, just like the cow receives from the side of the left. And just like when it comes to the side of the left, because there's so little revelation, the hashpa goes to the hitzoniim, so too from the midos of the nefesh bahamis. The Alter Rebbe is going to say that the form of the nefesh bahamis is the midos, the actual emotions of the nefesh bahamis that one has, desire and lust after tanugei elam hazeh, that are permitted, or aser chas v'shalom, when a person has a desire and a will from something of this physical world, that thing becomes a vessel to the desire and will that the person has in his heart. And so to the oisius, the letters that a person thinks and speaks about how to achieve this thing that he desires, those letters also become vessels to the will that the person has for things of this world, and how much more so if a person actually does a maisa. These all become kalim and levushim, vessels and garments for the ratzon, for the improper desire, and so the form of the nefesh bahamis becomes desires to things of this world, beheter beisser, and they become then enclosed in the letters that one thinks or speaks or does of these things. But just like we said, when it comes to burning, you take off the form and reduce it to its most essential element. The most essential element of the nefesh bahamis is a koyach misave pashut, is a simple desire for self-gratification. Just like an animal's not bad, it just wants self-gratification. So the nefesh bahamis is chaymer pashut, the essential chaymer of what the nefesh bahamis is made up of, so to speak, is desiring what's good for me. The form, the yetzer hara, the tsura that it takes, that this essential willing, this essential desiring of the nefesh bahamis for what's good for it, for what it enjoys, it could be rectified if one burns off, so to speak, the form of the koyach misava, of the koyach of taiva that the nefesh bahamis has. Once the nefesh bahamis is enclosed in an actual taiva ra'ah, that's ra gomor. But the mahus koyach hazeh, the essential etzem atzmusei, desiring of nefesh bahamis, the form that it took was bad, but the essential desiring itself could also be koyach misava l'toiv. One could rectify the nefesh bahamis and make it that it should want that what's good for it, holiness. Just like now it has a taiva for evil, you can make that it has a taiva for good. You have to just burn off the tzura it has now, the levushim tsoyim, the garments with feces on them, meaning the forms, the bad forms that the nefesh bahamis has taken to make a person go away from doing mitzvahs essay or even to have taivas for things that are forbidden. But the essential koich misava in and of itself, one could turn one's heart from one side to the other. Again, this is how the burning of the parah is the inyan of Retsoo. One comes to Retsoo when one burns off, take the levushim tsoyim of the form of the nefesh bahamis, and instead to have a taiva and to love and to have a chayfetz, to have dveikus to Hashem. Like it says, nafshi visicha, the nafshi, you God are my nafshi, just like a person loves their own soul. Nafshi, you God are my nafshi, therefore visicha, I have a taiva for you. Because again, the koich mesav nefesh bahamis, it comes from a very holy place, from the pnei shorsh b'makava. That's its root. It's just that it fell through many levels, through shviras hakelim, and therefore became a taiva for also averis. But when a person returns to Hashem, he could change his heart from one side to the other. That the koich mis'ava, that until now the koich of taiva that was enclosed in something negative, is now going to be enclosed instead in avos Hashem, just like it was in its root in the pnei shor. So this is the inyan of sripas hapara, that you take the parah and you take away its tzur, you burn it, and you take away its form, and all that's left is the essential element of ashes of dirt. So same thing with nefesh bahamis. The essential midas of nefesh bahamis, the essential koyach of taiva, is a chomer pashut. The tzura that the nefesh bahamis took of the levushim tsoyim, of the actual thoughts, speeches, and actions of negative things, that's koich mis'ava that becomes enclosed in levushim tsoyim. One has to burn those away. And then one is left with just the koich mis'ava, which then could be turned to avos Hashem. But one has to burn away the garments of the koich mis'ava that became the levushim tsoyim, that they should be completely burned away. Meaning that no longer should a person be thinking about these things, rather hesach hadas legamri, to think about or to even talk about, and how much more so not to do chas v'sholom. That a person will close one's eyes from seeing something ra, and other ways of doing iskafia, to do the opposite of what the taiva nefesh bahamis wants, with seeing and hearing different things in thought, speech, and action, but instead doing iskafia and taking away those vessels of negativity that the nefesh bahamis was enclosed in, and to be doiche those garments. And that's the inyan of the burning of the parah, to take away the three elements of fire, wind, and water. So too, when one takes off the garments, the tzura of the animal, so the levushim tsoyim of machshava dibur maisa, of visser, when one takes off those garments, what's left is just the essential taiva. And one could then me'akotza lakotza turn that taiva to be avos Hashem, which is the meaning of b'chol levavcha b'shnei etzarecha. A piece of dirt can never be made clean, but something that essentially is just a koich mis'ava, wanting self-gratification, that's not dirt in and of itself. So that's what it means, that you could love Hashem b'shnei etzarecha, that the Yetzer Hara should come to love avos Hashem also through this iskafia of pushing away, burning off the levushim, and rather coming to the chomer pashut. That's this hapcha, that one comes to the chomer pashut of avos Hashem. And this is the inyan of Shema Yisrael. Shema is Sham Ayin, with a large ayin. The large ayin is the 7 midos, 7 emotions of holiness, how each one is included with 10, which is the inyan of like the 70 nefesh beis Yaakov. But through shviras hakelim and the death of the 7 kings, the inyan of shviras hakelim of Toyu, once these 7 midos fall into that place of death, what is then brought about is midos ra'os, is bad emotions, and is hapches dafka, going to that place of bad emotions, meaning the chomer pashut, and changing it. But it's sham ayin, you have to go to get the ayin to be able to ishapcha, to rectify the emotions. One has to go to sham. What's sham? What's the meaning of sham ayin, that one rectifies the 7 midas? One does this hapcha by going to sham. What's sham ayin? Sham is what, like the Baal Shem Tov taught on the pasuk, bikashta misham es havaya umatzasa, that you will seek out God misham dafka. Sham is a lashon that means a sitra achra, because it's the opposite of saying zeh. When you say zeh, this, That's something you could show with your finger, which essentially everything is all just, the only thing that really exists is God, so the only thing you could really say, this is Zekeli Vanveyu, because God's light is everywhere. But the Makam Mishkan, Aklipis, which are very far from God, they're called Sham, Kaloimer Amoik Ma'oid Lamata, very deep below, in a place of death and Shvira, and Bikoshta Misham, Esavai Lekechu Matzasa, the Dafka, if you search there, you'll find a Kadosh Baruch Hu Mamish Kilesa Sarponi Minei. There's no place devoid of Him. Even in Sham, one can find Hashem through Bikashtem as Hashem to scream out to God, but Sarle from the depth of one's heart, from the depth of one's heart. The Yin of Tshuva that turns the darkness into light, and from Sham becomes Shem Ayin. What's the Inyan of Shem? The 248 Nitzoitzes, the Rafach Nitzoitzin, and Shem Ban, which is Malchus, meaning the Inyan of the lower world, the Nitzoitzes and Shem Ban. That's the Inyan of Shem, because the Gematria of 288, the Rafach Nitzoitzin 288 and 52 is the Gematria Shem, and they ascend to their source in the higher Ayin, meaning the Zayin Tachtoidim the Sag, meaning the essential root of the emotions as they're in Hashem's light in Adam Kadmon. And this burning of the animal soul is the Ratzoo, the running towards Hashem, which is also why the Parah comes to purify from Tumas Meis, which is in of Shriya Sakelim, the death of the 7 kings, Vayomas, one who falls from their Madrega, is called death. And Adumah, this whole Inion of Rtzoo ושוב, is the tikkun of the Inion of death, which is why we read Parshas Parah always before Chodesh Nisan, so in order to purify ourselves before we come to the Inion of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Ad kan Azois Beis.